I'm Dr. John McDougall. I've been in this business for 44 years, and I'm the luckiest doctor in the world because my patients get well. It started out by a bit of an accident. I took a job on the Big Island as a plantation doctor, and there I worked as a general doctor for 3 years. I caught babies, I pronounced people dead, I did brain surgery in the middle of the night. But I learned everything that I know today during those 3 years from my patients. First thing I learned is that I wasn't a very good doctor. I thought I was going to make all these miraculous cures. I watched Ben Casey, Dr. Kildare, Marcus Welby. I knew what a real doctor did. I went into this general practice on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I started taking care of these 5,000 sugar plantation patients. And I gave them the best pills I could find. Sent them off to the best surgeons in Honolulu, and they wouldn't get well. They just stayed fat and sick. I thought it was because I was a bad doctor. I realized my limitations as a physician during those 3 years. I was humbled. I learned how to eat because I was taking care of 5,000 people who ate differently. I was taking care of first, second, third, and fourth generation Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, and Koreans. Now, my first generation, they learned how to eat when they were little kids in their native land of the Philippines, Japan, China, Korea. They learned a diet of rice and vegetables. And then they had the fortune of moving to the Big Island to start new families, a new life. They took their original diet and they continued to eat rice and vegetables. The kids, who were influenced a little bit by the Western diet, they started to change. And by the time you got to the grandkids, you were looking at people who ate the traditional Western diet. Now, realize these are people with the same genetics, same kind of work for over 100 years on the sugar plantation. Yet before my eyes as a doctor, I saw people living on rice and vegetables, no dairy, just a little bit of meat at most, trim, healthy, hearty people, no MS, no arthritis, no diabetes, no heart disease in that first generation living on those traditional diets. And then I watched the second generation get a little fatter and sicker as they abandoned starch. And then third generation, which feared starch, rice, corn, potatoes, and took on meat and dairy in their diet and oils. They got fat and sick just like every other American. After 3 years, I had to leave as a general practitioner. I spent the next 2 years studying in the scientific library, in the medical library, next to Queens Medical Center, to see whether anybody else had made this observation, that people who live on starch, rice, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, are thin, healthy, hearty, young-looking, not just in the world today, but throughout history. That was important because that told me right there and then that getting older didn't mean getting fat and sick. It didn't have to be that way. But as I read in the science, I discovered something else that was profound, and I'm sure it's going to be easy for you to understand. When you stop doing things that make people sick, they get well. If I had figured out that eating a well-balanced diet with lots of meat and dairy made people sick, then the only next clue I needed was the idea that I could be a miracle doctor. I could fulfill what I wanted to do as a physician, which is to help other people by applying this very simple principle, and that is to feed people a diet for human beings. You know, there is a diet for people. I know you might be surprised considering the variety that everybody eats. But there is a diet for human beings, and each one of you ought to be able to answer that question for yourself, for your spouses, for your children, for your friends. You should be able to have that answer. When somebody says, well, what do human beings eat? After all, you know what a cat eats. Cats are carnivores, and horses have a diet. Parrots have a diet. You never take and feed your parrot meat or your cat nuts and seeds. Every animal must have a diet. What is the diet for human beings? Well, history would tell us what that is. When you look back through history and you go back 2.5 million years, you see that human beings lived on starch-based diets. We have evidence from 44,000 years ago that the Neanderthals lived on starches. We have written evidence about what people ate. And if you're a person of history, you know what people ate. Throughout human history, all large, successful populations have obtained the bulk of their calories from starch. I'm sure lots of examples are popping in your mind. You're thinking about the Aztecs and Mayans, the people of the corn. And if you go a little further south and you look at the Incas, they lived on potatoes, except when they went to battle and they switched to quinoa. And if you go to the Middle East, these people are from the bread baskets of the world. In Asia, I think most people can relate to rice-based diets. Think about these people: trim, hardy, healthy, strong warriors. The diet of human beings has been traditionally and always will be a diet based on starch with fruits and vegetables. What happened is people became more effective at gathering calories. Every society no longer had to eat the starches. They could instead eat the animals. A certain segment of the population throughout human history became wealthier than the rest of the people. You have the pharaohs and the kings and the priests of 3,500 years ago described as fat. The examination of their bodies 3,500 years later shows terrible atherosclerosis, gallbladder disease, and all kinds of other problems of Western civilization. People became wealthier. We had the Industrial Revolution in its midst 150 years ago, and we had the discovery of fossil fuel. And as a consequence, almost everybody in Western society could eat like kings and queens. What's the result? We live in a society where people are fat and sick, and not just adults, but the children too. 30% of the kids are overweight. Not only are they overweight, but deep under their skin is a lot of sickness. These kids have atherosclerosis. They have arthritis. You as individuals, sick with various diseases, communities, countries, and the world can't get healthy by making a simple change back to a starch-based diet. You have to give up dairy, ice cream, cheese, chicken, steaks. You say, I'm going to starve to death. It's like asking me to give up breathing or asking me to give up drinking water. You think it's an impossible task. That's because you've been faced with a serious untruth about starches. You love starch. I know you do. When I mention rice and beans, you have a very positive reaction. If I mention pasta, you say, well, that's comfort food. What you need to do is live on starch, on oatmeal for breakfast, hash brown potatoes. For lunch, you need to have bean soup, pea soup, lentil soup. For dinner, you have bean burritos, pasta marinara sauce, vegetables, and rice. This is the kind of education that we need. We need new dietary goals for the United States. We need a government that will stand up and tell the truth to the people. We need a society that will not tolerate uncivilized behavior like letting our children be sick and our military be sick and our poor people be sick and our workers be sick because of the diet of kings and queens. And once we know that, we can change it. We can make a difference.